Yes, which one is it? This one?
Right. It's on the Outlook. Let's go to the Outlook one. And then just click on that one and do full screen. There we go.
All right. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Going to close the doors, guys. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our last Tuesday series. Sorry, start with my name. I'm Nisha Randall with the Office of Commissioner Rodney Ellis, and we're so glad that you all are here tonight for Black Studies teach-in, honoring our history and defending our future. So this evening is part of our last Tuesday's program, and we like to think of it as a space that we host each month to bring people together in different ways. Sometimes it's going to be teaching like this, sometimes a forum, a panel, movie screening, TED Talk, what have you. At the end of the day, just what we want to do is bring people together regularly where they can have conversations like this or other things that bring us together in a room for reflection, learning, and the kind of dialogue that moves us to act. So tonight we're focusing on something that feels particularly urgent: protecting the story, scholarship, and the truth that Black studies hold. And because there are real efforts to erase Black history, we also know that Black scholars have also been truth tellers, visionaries, and builders of liberation. So tonight we are privileged to have an incredible panel, an incredible lineup rather, of speakers, and I know you're all just as excited to hear from them as I am. So we hope tonight that you leave with some insight, a deeper connection to history, to each other, and to what's possible when we protect and invest in Black thought. And I'm honored to introduce our moderator and guide for tonight, Dr. Felicia Harris, Associate Professor of Communications at the University of Houston Downtown, a Principal Consultant at Black and Social, and Vice Chair of the Harris County Women's Commission, where she proudly serves as Commissioner Ellis's appointee. So please join me in welcoming our moderator for tonight, Dr. Felicia Harris.
Thank you so much, Nisha. I am so grateful to the Office of Commissioner Rodney Ellis and the entire Precinct 1 team for supporting our vision of hosting a Black Studies teach-in at a time like this. And I just prepared my remarks earlier today because of everything that's going on, so bear with me while I read a little bit off the paper. So in addition to winding down a month-long series of events commemorating the 160th anniversary of Juneteenth, we meet here this evening under very precarious circumstances across the globe and here in our own country, conflicts and injustices that we are fighting to hold space for. However, I do stand here in solidarity with folks experiencing injustice and oppression of all forms, knowing that the work to dismantle and eliminate systemic oppression starts in moments just like these, where we're able to come together in community to bear witness, to learn from one another, and to address one issue at a time. And make no mistake about it, tonight we are teaching under attack, against the backdrop of all that we have going on. We are also in the midst of an unprecedented moment of transformation in public education in this country, and in particular in our state. I got my pictures up here to get us started with. In 2022, I had the honor of leading the curation of an education house for Project Row House's Round 53, The Curious Case of Critical Race Theory. The round was in response to the national spotlight on CRT at the time and calls to eliminate CRT from K-12 lessons plans, even though they were never really there. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I identify as a writer/creative and not an artist/creative, but I immediately had a vision of what became known internally as the caution-taped classroom here. We used our space to visually portray a tale of what could happen if legislators had their way, placing caution tape over books that would be banned and posters of notable Black figures we may never get to learn about. We drilled holes into textbooks to signify the gaps in information that would be taught, and adorned a chalkboard with questions of the day, like, in 2022, how and why does racism persist in American law and society? And then, of course, who does it help or hurt to ban a theory? When these photos popped up in my social media memories a few months ago, it gave me chills, because this is no longer a cautionary tale. We are here now. Since 2022, we've seen several laws passed that will not only radically transform how we teach and learn about Black and American history, lives, and culture, but we've also seen laws passed to eliminate how institutions support and retain Black students, students of color, and students from other historically excluded and marginalized groups. For those of you in the audience who have completed your education, you should know that the K-12 and college experience that you had the privilege of having will look vastly different tomorrow than it did even just yesterday. So, what are we going to do about it? That's what we are here to begin thinking about tonight. And I couldn't think of a better subject to start this conversation off with than Black Studies. Black Studies as an academic discipline was birthed by student activism and protests in the 1960s against the backdrop of the Civil Rights Movement. The calls for Black Studies programs were steeped in demands for an education that served all students. This area of inquiry is so diverse and nuanced because Black people, Black history, and Black culture reverberate throughout humanity and society. You can find Black Studies scholars in medicine and health, science and technology, politics and government, business, performing arts, visual arts, literature, poetry and drama, sports, education, mass communication, social services, religion, military, and more. And while we couldn't get folks to represent each of those areas tonight, we do have a stellar, and I mean stellar, lineup of speakers who research, practice, and teach in the discipline from all across the greater Houston area. Tonight, you are going to hear from speakers in rapid fire succession, and they've been tasked with addressing the following questions. What do we stand to lose if Black Studies is eliminated from the higher education landscape? And how do we continue the tradition of teaching and learning Black Studies within and beyond the academy? As you listen, I urge you to consider how you might also answer those questions, and to jot down any questions or comments that might help us arrive at strategies or solutions during our Q&A discussion after they conclude. Now let me tell you a little bit about who they are. Dr. Tanisha Taylor is a professor of communication at Texas Southern University and director of the Center for Africana Futures. Dr. Taylor's research primarily focuses on the intersections of race, digital media, and higher education. She explores how digital platforms influence racial discourse and activism, particularly through the lens of a Black womanist perspective. Professor Anthony Suber is an interdisciplinary artist and assistant professor of art at the University of Houston, and an artist in residence with Project Row Houses in Houston's historic Third Ward community, a real artist, not a creep like me, right? He also serves as the creative director for the arts and mental health nonprofit, the Black Man Project. Dr. Annie Ring is an assistant professor of philosophy at the University of Houston Downtown, where she teaches courses in critical philosophy of race, feminist philosophy, environmental philosophy, and decolonial philosophy. Her research critiques racialized and gendered systems of meaning, including language, controlling images, and stereotypes. Dr. Elizabeth Whittington is an assistant professor of communication at Prairie View A&M University. And Dr. Whittington specializes in critical intercultural communication with a focus on the intersections of race, gender, and sexuality. Recently, she founded Get Wit Therapy and is a licensed marriage and family therapist associate, specializing in BIPOC and queer individuals, couples, and families. And last, but never the least, Dr. Vida Robertson is an associate professor of English and Humanities and the director of the Center for Social Inquiry and Transformation at the University of Houston Downtown. Dr. Robertson's primary research interests are in late 19th century and 20th century African American literature, cultural studies, men of color in higher education, and critical race theory. So, without further ado, let's get ready to listen and learn.
Thank you. Good evening. How is everyone on this fine Tuesday? Yes. Praise the Lord. All right. You know, you have to ask sometimes because it's not always easy to remember. Thank you. I'm a huge fan of the shameless self-promotion. Where am I clicking and which direction am I going? This one? Nope. There we go. There we go. All right. So tonight we're talking about rewriting the ledger, how Black studies powers workforce and innovation. Again, I'm a huge fan of the shameless self-promotion. So you can follow me on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter. I also am sometimes on Twitch because I'm a huge, huge fan of playing video games in my spare time, of which I have absolutely none. Recently, I published a piece in the special issue of Communication and Democracy called Black Parade, Marching Toward a Future of Resistance and Renewal in Texas Education. You can also find me on my corner of the internet at drtonishaltaylor.com. I'm honored to join you at this critical moment in Black studies. I'm here representing the Center for Africana Futures, a space born from the urgency to fuse liberation studies, Black studies, and womanist studies with real-world outcomes. Tonight, I want to show you how we're not only studying systems, but we're building new ones. And we're building new ones through programs like the Center for Africana Futures Production Payroll Accounting Certification. How many of you know how much the average salary is for a production accountant, so someone who works on film and television? No ideas? None? Qualifications necessary? No, no. I can tell you neither did I. My assumption was in order to be a production accountant, you needed to have a bachelor's degree. That's not true, right? You need to have a high school diploma, you need to be 18 years old, you need to not have felony convictions, and you need to have a credit score of 500. And you too can be managing the production accounts for Black Panther. Right? Whoa. Right? The industry is changing though and wanting to see more people have certifications, which gives us an opportunity to look at the ways in which Black studies is part of workforce development. At the Center for Africana Futures, we center community empowerment and digital innovation. Our goal is to create futures where Black scholarship, labor, and technology intersect. We don't just theorize about equity, we build frameworks to produce equity. And one way that we do that is through our digital humanities programs, our cultural analytics studies, and our certification programs like the one I'm going to be talking about today. Go ahead and scan that QR code. Take out your phone. Let's take a closer look at one of our most impactful programs and initiatives, which is the Production Payroll Accounting Program. I just mentioned that you don't have to have a bachelor's degree in order to be a production accountant. But a production accountant who's fair to middling at their job, nothing special, they're just, doing work, makes $1,400 a week. Someone, now see y'all, $5,500 a week. Given what the governor is doing around increasing film production in the state of Texas, this is viable for our community, right? So what we're looking at doing is creating a certification program that's in demand so that people in our community can work on film sets and in studio projects and are doing so in a way in which is revolutionary. Our curriculum is Black-centered. It's rooted in Black studies traditions. We discuss labor history, racialized capitalism, the political economy of media production, and the ways in which we can change that through participation. We create a real-world pipeline training students in these top 3 softwares for the 3 biggest production companies, finance production companies. So we're partnered with Entertainment Partners, Cast and Crew, and Green Slate to deliver this training. Our goal here is to disrupt the role of gatekeepers that intentionally place Black or marginalized folks in industries that don't lead to professional success. So our goal is to change that moment. This isn't just job training. This is a way for us to remix Black studies into the future of labor. What we're looking at is changing the teaching history and infrastructure and examining the ways that anti-Black labor practices shape the gig economy and changing that. We want to certify a resistance where people are coming into this space with the certifications necessary to not just get the job, but keep the job, not just have the job, but advance in the career. This is a certification designed for liberation. At the center, we're not simply looking to build careers. We're looking to make sure that the future is Black certified. So come and join us in these essential workforce dreams and making them a reality. Thank you. There you go.
How do you advance it? Sorry.
That one.
I love how we're all getting up here like technological Luddites and talking about the future. Thank you, Dr. Harris, for the invitation to participate in this essential conversation. I'll try to keep it under 7 minutes. So I'd like to talk a little bit about more abstract ideas in the idea of building a time machine, and building a time machine, more importantly, one that can travel the cosmos. And because I'm an Afrofuturist, I'm an artist that always thinks about the past, present, and future as one in terms of time and the way that our culture gets represented through pop culture, through the arts, and through anything that we deem creative. This is a very important topic for me. So what I'll try to do is attempt to abstractly teach you how to build this time machine. So with regard to my abstract title, when I say time travel, I'm referring to the way we observe history, exist in the present, and dream about the untethered future, which is a foundational principle of Afrofuturist thought. With the passing of legislation like SB 37, my fear is that we will no longer be able to do those things as effectively for the future generations. So there are 2 key elements that we need to build this time machine. And in thinking about building it for time travel, for the purposes of time travel, and the idea of transversing the cosmos, I want to point to these 2 imperatives. So the very first one is the importance of using art for the purposes of recording and reflecting history while ensuring liberation in our community. And this is something I'll talk a little bit more about in a few slides. And then the second point that I'd like to make and point out is the significance of intentional mentorship. And paraphrasing it to say, using the past to envision a sustainable future. Also, I didn't say this at the beginning of my talk. If you're not taking notes, there's going to be a quiz on this at the end. And if you don't pass, you can't come to this ever again. So in correlation to that idea, I think about the Sankofa symbol. So raise your hands if you've been to the Gregory School. So when you walk outside the Gregory School, I'm sure most of you have noticed that there are the Ndikra symbols in the front, and one of them is the Sankofa symbol, which means go back and get it, essentially. And so this is a thing that I think, to me, it permeates not just mentorship, but it permeates all parts of our culture through music, through visual art, and through legacy. Outside of that, and in connection to that, I want to talk a little bit about Project Row Houses. And so Dr. Harris mentioned my time at Project Row Houses as a artist in residence, and I've had the privilege of being a part of that tapestry for the last 6 or 7 years, but my connection to Project Row Houses actually started back in 1998 when I met this gentleman, Floyd Newsom, who was my mentor. He embodied for me, and I didn't realize it at the time, but this idea of going back and getting it, not only for the sake of art, but also for the sake of education and for the community. Now at the time, you know how when you meet somebody important and you have no idea who you're talking to? At the time I walked into his space, I had taken some classes at U of H downtown before matriculating to University of Houston Central. One of the things that he said to me that just sticks with me even to this day was that, brother, you gotta get out here and do something with your work. And so in that, he envisioned for me a future that I could not see for myself. Another artist that I want to talk about in relation to this idea of envisioning the future is Aaron Douglas. So I gave a talk at Tennessee State University about 10 years ago and got the opportunity. I'd seen Aaron Douglas' works in book form and in slides for many years in art history classes, but when I got a chance to see his murals in person at Fisk University, it blew me away. And there are several things that I want to note about the way that he was thinking, or the way that I thought about his work and the way that he potentially may have been thinking when he was making this work in correlation to the idea of the future. To me, his work echoes the past while keeping a fixed vision of the future. His visual tapestries are filled with suggestions of what can become and warnings about repeating past mistakes that can come from cultural amnesia, which is something that we have suffered from in various versions throughout time and history. So I want to use this to bring up kind of the third point about building our time machine, is that the dangers of allowing our creative, historical, and societal capital to be used, erased, modified, withheld through the form of hegemony or other devices from us as a people is too great. We have to protect it at all costs. And so for me, I've talked about this at end when I gave the lecture at Tennessee State University. I talked to many of the young artists there, and they had no idea what I was talking about, the idea of amnesia, cultural amnesia. And so if you don't know what I mean by that is that you don't have access to your history, and someone else has access to it. And so you're around that history, you're around that legacy, but you have no real access to it. So with speaking about erasure, the other thing that I think about is cultural appropriation through the forms of music. And so just giving some examples of how this has happened in the past through other creative forms. And so we want to be careful to make sure that this actually does not happen with our visual arts, which I don't think. So two other artists. So in closing, I'm going to talk about these two artists and I'll be done in 7 minutes. So Wangechi Mutu, and one of my favorites is Martin Puryear, who both are sculptors. The reason why I brought up these two to talk about this idea of social sculpture, which is my final point, is that when you look at their work, even though they are not social sculptors, their work physically embodies this idea of moving through time and understanding the importance of the history there and the culture that you're connected to. I saw this piece at the Fort Worth Museum, and I was just blown away by how structurally it represents the way that we navigate through time and culture. And so in closing, as I kind of leave this slide up here, I want to say that the last and final kind of fuel element that we need to power this ship is we have to control and create our own opportunities for creative influence and how the history gets told and connected back to our community and to our ancestors. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for that. I used to be on the Project Row Houses board, and it's very important to Harris County Precinct 1 and our community. I'm former Congresswoman Erica Lee Carter, and I'm honored to be here with you. It is so important that we protect Black studies, Black voices, Black thought, Black history. And I'm more than honored to introduce a legend in Black history, Black present, Black future, the best commissioner west of the Mississippi, your commissioner, Commissioner Rodney Ellis.
Thank you, Congresswoman. She and I were meeting. She's our policy director here at Precinct 1. So she's come up with some very innovative things. Is it 4 years now? Well, before 5 years, the time flies. Thank you all for coming. I see a lot of good friends in here coming in. I did see another history maker, Anthony Robinson. Sometimes I'll slip and I'll get you mixed up with Anthony Graves, but I met Anthony in an earlier life. I saw an article in the paper where then Governor Bush had given this guy a pardon for innocence. And Anthony, I think we'd already passed the DNA testing statute, right? In Texas. And so, no, you did your own. You got it paid for privately. But Anthony, I called him up front to meet with his I talked to his lawyer and I said, send him over, I want a meeting. But Anthony helped us shepherd a bill through Texas legislature that increased the compensation for people who've been wrongfully convicted from what was $25,000 period to $50,000 a year, capped at 10 years. He's a Black History man as well. Helped him and a lot of other people, Blacks, whites, and Hispanics, South Asians, give him a warm round of applause. Legislative internship program. I saw where somebody used to hold public office was complaining, saying that they're running for judges. Maybe you are running for judge. You know what the opposite side, you know what injustice looks like, so you be a good judge. Look, African Americans built this country. Not just this country, but they built Western civilization. Think about that. I think I could build a pretty good Western civilization with 200 or so years of free labor. And sometimes when I think about all of this controversy, what people want to rewrite history, just think about what my ancestors went through. And if I got over it, if African Americans got over it, and we love this country, we salute the flag, what the hell are these other people upset about? What do you say about it? It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's the nuttiest thing in the world. No other group of people on the face of the earth would be as forgiving as the descendants of African slaves were. And then you think about what he did to really devour leadership, create so many problems that still exist today. And it's important for us to know that history. Not just so that we don't repeat it, but also we have a healthier respect for everybody's culture. I want to welcome you to the John and Hazel Bakers Center. And I hope that you enjoy art. And we've got a quick rapid fire program. I want to thank the educators, the Black history educators who took from their time to come here and be here tonight and do this. I want to thank my staff. You know, we try to do something once a month. If we'd known this building would be so popular, I guess we wouldn't have the patio out there. You know, but thank you for coming. And we'll do something, obviously, for Hispanic Heritage Month. We want to do as much as we can so that we respect and appreciate everyone's culture. We have an event for the South Asian community here. We want to do something for every community because I think we're all better when we realize we really are in this together. Thank you.
And we'll keep the program going with Dr. Annie Rain.
Thank you. How's everyone doing? Good. So I am an assistant professor of philosophy at UHD. Pretty new to Houston, and I love it. There's so many beautiful things about this community that I'll talk a little bit about as we go. And because I'm a philosopher, I am pretty fired up about the things that have been happening. So I did what philosophers do best, and I wrote an argument. So if I'm coming in hot, that's why. But I'm going to start with a story. So a few years ago, I was part of an initiative called Black Thought Matters at the University of Oregon. And the goal was to show the importance of Black thought and to make sure it was included in the philosophy curriculum. We also wanted to change a popular story about philosophy, which is that it's a white masculine field and that white men are its main or sometimes only contributors. And sure, white men have contributed to the field. That part's not totally incorrect. But over time, a few things have happened that are really concerning. So first, the downplay of the importance of Black thought for philosophy. Second, the exclusion of Black thought from curriculum. And third, the marginalization of Black thought to the outskirts or the edges of the field. The mainstream story minimizes the importance of Black thought. And the initiative was going to show that the story is wrong, that Black thought matters. And so one of the things I love about Houston is that the audience here today is like, duh. Of course Black thought matters, of course. But unfortunately, many communities still don't recognize its significance. Some state legislatures, including our own, have attempted to remove Black studies from higher education or minimize it. And this is a major mistake for many reasons. I'm going to just show that for philosophy, this is a major mistake because if we don't include Black studies, we're not able to actually adequately or accurately philosophize. And there's dozens of thinkers I could talk about here who have contributed massively to the field, but for the sake of time, so I'm not going to keep you here all night, I'm going to do just one, Frantz Fanon. And so Frantz Fanon's study of the lived experience of the Black man in an anti-Black world shook philosophy to its core. He demonstrated assumptions at the center of 3 different fields. Psychoanalysis, which is just a pretentious word for the study of the unconscious. Phenomenology, the study of perception, how we see the world. And existentialism, or the study of existence and human meaning-making. What is the meaning of our lives? What can we make of them? And so first, related to the unconscious, Freud originally studied individuals, and he thought the unconscious was biological. Carl Jung came next, and he expanded it to consider the collective, but still thought that it was biological. But Fanon demonstrated how both the individual and collective unconscious is socially formed in a particular time, place, culture, and language. Unfortunately, in an anti-Black world, anti-Blackness shapes the collective unconscious. That is why he advocates for decolonizing the mind and just getting that white supremacist ideology out of there, right? Purging it out. And so, really, without Fanon's work, we would not understand that the unconscious is shaped by its context, meaning we would not understand the unconscious. So psychoanalysis needs the thought of Fanon in order to be effective. Centering Black experience was and is necessary. So second, the field of perception. Fanon's work showed that the study of perception, how we see the world, also did not account for context. Fanon was among the first to say that we're socialized into how we see our world, one another, and ourselves. The values of the collective shape our perception, and an anti-Black world can build anti-Black perception. Fanon calls this the white gaze, or the influence of white anti-Black media, curriculum, history, economic and political systems, and structures on how we see the world, each other, and ourselves. So Fanon was concerned about the Black community adopting the white gaze because it could limit Black solidarity, autonomy, self-love, creativity, movement, and joy. But because perception is socially formed, it can be influenced instead to emphasize Black solidarity, autonomy, self-love, creativity, movement, and joy. And so Fanon really inspired a lot of the Black Power movement and the Black Panther Party's curriculum, which worked to perceive Blackness positively. So centering Black experience taught philosophy how perception is influenced by a context and why we see our world, one another, and ourselves the way we do. The field would be incomplete without Black studies. And so the last one I'll talk about is the study of existence. And Fanon also revealed assumptions in existentialism. Existentialists claimed that human beings define themselves through their choices. There isn't a pre-given definition of what a human being is. We make it up, which is terrifying and liberating at the same time. We're all making it up. But Fanon showed that racialized populations are given a definition from the outside by white supremacist ideology, systems, and structures. Popular media, history, curriculum, right? racializing a community attempts, unsuccessfully, to minimize their existential freedom by projecting a negative definition onto them to limit their positive self-definition. I'm repping up. But as Fanon shows, even in an anti-Black world, Black people still define themselves, still choose who they want to be. Existential creativity and meaning-making happens in the most difficult of situations. But how easy or difficult it is to define oneself, and sometimes the access to the desired choices, depends on a world of social values. As Angela Davis's work reminds us, freedom is a constant struggle. But as Fanon's work also reminds us, existential creativity cannot be stamped out, and that resistance through self-definition is powerful. So we must include Black studies if we want to know how to resist definitions projected onto communities from the outside, and if we want to know how to pursue an existence that we want, even in a world that we want to change. So to wrap up, without Black studies, philosophy would not understand the unconscious, perception, and the human freedom to create ourselves. So the popular narrative about philosophy, which minimizes the importance of Black thought, has got it all wrong. Black thought matters. It is necessary and central to philosophy. We must include Black studies in our curriculum, and we can't let people who don't know better tell us otherwise.
Good evening, beautiful people. How's everybody doing? As introduced, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Whittington. I'm an assistant professor at Prairie View A&M University. $150,000. It may not seem like a lot, but for a fairly new program in the humanities, this grant meant we would get to further a program we were proud of, that students wanted, and we didn't have a lot of money. So this grant that was provided for us by the National Endowment of Humanities was something that was going to change our program, and within a year it was terminated. Last summer, I had the privilege, when this grant was first funded, to design and develop a course that I titled Interpersonal Communication and Black Relationships. This came from my connection with AFAM Studies, which is what we call our program, African American Studies, and my students. They desired a class that centered their experiences, their relationships, a class that held practical value, but also a greater understanding of how historical race, racial disparities, systemic racism had impacted how Black people do relationships. It all started for me in my classes in 2021. I've been teaching for so long now that classes started to get really boring to me. So I decided that I was going to read books that I also enjoyed, and I was gonna have my students read these books. So in 2021, I started to find Black authors that dealt with some of the content that we were talking about in class. So some of the books that were included were Project 1619 by Nikole Hannah-Jones, How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith, How We Fight White Supremacy, A Field Guide to Black Resistance by Akiba Solomon and Kenra Rankin, You Are Your Best Thing, Vulnerability, Shame, Resilience, and the Black Experience, written by various Black authors and activists and edited by Tarana Burke and Brene Brown. So over the last 3 semesters, my students read Bell Hooks' trilogy, All About Love, Salvation, and Communion. I added this element when I realized my students at an HBCU didn't know enough about Black authors, diverse Black experiences, and the historical context of Blackness. Being able to teach from a Black studies lens has made me a better professor. I spend more time curating classes that I wish I could have taken in college. The need for classes like this remind Black students that their voices matter. And for non-Black students, it allows them to learn about a group who has been a part of America since it was colonized, a reminder of a group that is often forgotten about in mainstream classes. Learning about people who are different from you allows you to be more empathetic and to learn about a perspective different than your own. This is why I'm here today. I feel passionate about all things Black, not just because I'm Black, but because I have literally seen students' lives transformed through taking classes that widen their knowledge and their experiences. Ending Black Studies is not just terminating grants. It's terminating access and knowledge that folks have been trying to erase for centuries. Terminating Black Studies means saying Black experiences don't matter. And I stand before you today saying we matter. Black Studies matter, and keeping Black Studies at universities and colleges matter.
Well, good afternoon, my colleagues. They've given me the task of rounding this up. My name is Dr. Vida Robertson. I'm the director of the Center for Social Inquiry and Transformation at the University of Houston downtown. And for a little while today, I'd like to teach you about race as a technology. On August 28, 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King, during the March on Washington, offered a glimmer of hope to a nation that was struggling with the savage realities and brutalities of racism and oppression. He would poignantly say, "I have a dream deeply rooted in the American dream, a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out its meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will live without being judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." These iconic words have fashioned our understanding and shaped the contours of our discussions around race and racism for over a generation. Martin Luther King, like many other freedom fighters of his time, theoretically racialized the racial oppression that he experienced as an unfortunate and momentary lapse in our nation's quest for equality. You see, this idealistic perspective of Blackness and Black people, it refuses to admit that God is not the only creator among us. The tragic truth is that this historic speech was written by AI. Of course, you're thinking to yourselves, how could MLK give a speech or this national address written by ChatGPT when AI wasn't even created in 1960? Race as technology. You see, civil rights activist and author James Baldwin allude to this notion of race as a technology in a widely publicized interview that he would offer to Dr. Kenneth Clark, where Baldwin explained it this way. He says, what white people have to do is to try to find out in their hearts, why is it necessary to have a Negro in the first place? Because I'm not a Negro, I'm a man. But if you think I'm a Negro, it means that you need him. Then you got to find out why. And Baldwin would conclude, and the future of this beloved country depends on that question. You see, unlike Martin Luther King, James Baldwin acknowledged that God is not the sole creator in our universe, that the very term Negro is an invention created by white society to perform some function more effectively, more efficiently, and on a larger scale. That is to say that Blackness is an idea, and the black identity defined by white supremacy materializes as a form of intellectual or artificial intelligence about humans and human nature. And thus, this 18th century technology enabled European countries to transform diverse African tribes into one singular subhuman race. Contemporary media scholar and literary theorist Wendy Chun would explain it this way. She says, when we move away from thinking or understanding what race is and move toward the idea of what race does, in the past, race has been much of a sorting technology. It tells us a little bit about how our innate features are determined by our exterior covering. What does it mean for race to be a techne or technology? Chun invites us to think of blackness as an evolving technology that makes things possible. For Chun and Baldwin, racism is an ideological software that is quietly operating in the background of our society, organizing reality and organizing and facilitating its programmers' objectives. Like modern technologies, racialization and racism require periodic updates to meet the challenges and the demands of its current users. So just like MySpace, for those of you who don't know what that is, ask somebody. Just like MySpace evolved into Facebook and then again into Instagram and Twitter, race and racism must revise and be updated to function in its present circumstances. As King passionately partnered with President Johnson to pursue his civil rights agenda, he unwittingly and unintentionally was building a new racist app, fundamentally flawed on the fundamentally flawed algorithms of ordering American life. And thus, Derek Bell, the scholar, would relay in his famous text, Faces at the Bottom of the Well, that racism is a constitutive or permanent component of American life. The gradual advancement and desegregation focused in our civil rights movement served to maintain white supremacy while preserving our nation's imaginary commitment to racial justice. You see, Bell would explain, what we've designated as racial progress is not a solution to that problem. It is simply a regeneration of the problem in a peculiar and a perverse form. Black people will never have full equality in this form of the country, and thus those Herculean efforts we hail as successful will produce nothing more than momentary or temporary peaks of progress and short-lived victories that slide into irrelevance as racial patterns adapt in new ways, and white supremacy and dominance take new forms. You see, for Derek Bell and for critical race theorists, our interrogation of race in Black studies must be a disruptive technology. CRT in Black studies strategically fights to expose, to disrupt, to contest, and dismantle the racist tactics that inform and influence the lives of Black peoples. We must embrace this notion and recognize that it is here, as we focus on race as a technology and embrace the inventions, the knowledge, and the perspectives of critical race theory, that the short-lived victories that we gained during the Obama era are sliding into irrelevance. In moments where we were embracing inclusivity, we are now doggedly trudging through the dogma of rampant Trumpism. Blackness as a technology elevates King's ultimate dream without inadvertently advocating the unacknowledged white supremacy operating it behind it. My beloved, my friends, and all my allies, Black Studies is not only here to stay because Black people are here to stay, but we must embrace it because it is the very mechanism that will liberate us from the conditions of our day.
Let me do this here. Is this back on? Okay. Y'all see why he had to go last? Y'all see why he had to go last? I need but you gotta cut that lapel mic off. All right, so I don't know if I want to be a visual artist, a philosopher, a sculptural artist, or what is this? A production They make it more than me, a production accountant. But anyway, they make it more than half the educators in this room, right? So we're gonna get these chairs set up for our few minutes that we have for Q&A. But while we do that, I just want to thank our partners and make sure we acknowledge them. Thank you all for coming, first of all. Round of applause for this room. I love seeing a tactile room to talk about Black studies in the community because that is definitely going to be our path forward, at least for the next few years, right? But we want to say thank you to the Society for Africans in the Diaspora. Of course, we're representing UHD Center for Social Inquiry and Transformation here. We have the Center for Africana Futures as our community partners. Engaged Voters and Tanisha Manning sponsoring that food. Thank you so much, Engaged Voters. And then, of course, Wellforce is sponsoring, I don't know if you saw those custom covered Oreos and Rice Krispie treats outside. Make sure you get some of those. So I'd like to invite our speakers to come up here to our high top chairs. And we're going to open it up for Q&A. Anybody? Do you have a microphone for the Q&A? Questions? Yeah.
Hey y'all. Hello. So as a mother of Black boys who are in public school, because I'm not fortunate enough to homeschool, what would y'all tell me how to keep the Black American studies alive when it's being taken out of the
Well, first of all, thank you not only for the question, but for the impetus that is driving. I'm sorry. Oh, 30, yes. So, she's telling me to hurry up. So with that in mind, I would say make sure that we're reading lots of African American literature. That literature is a repository of Black thought and history. It both provides for us the context for their existence and the beautiful tales that serve as motivation for other versions or for different versions of ourselves. So make sure they're reading lots of literature each and every day.
I would quickly just add, if they're comic book readers, there's only one Black-owned comic book store in the state of Texas, and it's in Houston. It's in Third Ward. So take them all there. So Gulf Coast Cosmos Comics. Yeah. Awesome. Great people. I love that place. I hang out there all the time. Can you say name again? Gulf Coast Cosmos Comics. They were on They moved to, they're going to be moving to, their new location is going to be at Wheeler and Emancipation, I believe. It's off of Emancipation.
They've already moved.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's a great spot. Check out their Instagram and their website, and you can find out their location. If you're not, for your friends who aren't in Houston, they can buy their comics through them online. So the other way that we do this is we support those Black-owned bookstores like Kindred, like Class, like Gulf Coast, here locally by going to those places, but we also buy from them online. And they have a curated reading list for age group, for school-age kids too, so, as well as activities.
Thank you.
Book clubs
And
and
book
readings
clubs.
and all kinds of things. They are wonderful. So I highly encourage any have a place to go and study and read,
Yeah.
which they didn't have before, which is nice to go for Black families. I was just going to say, in correlation said about studying authors and writings, I would say I always encourage my students, and my children went to a PWI, and one of them still goes to one. And the thing that we always encouraged them was to not only study the writers and what was there, what was outside there, but also just look at the movements that were going on around. So, for instance, Harlem Renaissance, look at the writers, look at the artists, look at the actors, look at everything that's going in totality, because one feeds the other.
And while you all raise your hands for the next question, I'll also bring them to public forums like this, right? My son is here on the front row. We have incredible organizations here in Houston, like Project Row Houses, like the Third World Cultural Project, like the Gregory School, and they're always hosting events. They're bringing speakers. They have budgets that have been eliminated from our money that's been eliminated from our budget. So if you see a public forum that is addressing Black history, Black culture, Black lives, pack your kids up and go on out there. Yes, questions?
Thank you all for the talk tonight. I was very intrigued. I kind of want to know, especially as I'm going to college next year, how are we at Public for your intuitions that are HBCUs fighting back against CRT and the ban of critical race theory, and how can, as a student, I advocate for a change in, like, informing my students, like, informing classmates on what's going on around us, because we are kind of closed-minded to what's actually happening right now.
HBCU.
I feel like, especially at HBCU, all of my colleagues at least, until you come in my classroom, I'm gonna teach you whatever I want to. I don't care about your view. For right now, nobody comes and checks us because we're like a redheaded stepchild. So I'm doing everything I can. I'm throwing Black books at them all the time. And also telling them about events that are happening. Prairie View is so far out, so I'm big on having things that are on campus or inviting other people, and I participated in a research project, and a faculty member who was in dance, and her student came all the way from California State, San Marcos, I think. And my students just got to see a different type of teaching from two Black people. So that was really great because they were like, ooh, California, and y'all do dance in class? And so it was really great just to give them a different experience. So most professors at HBCUs were there not because of the money. So we really do care about our Black students learning and knowing about their experiences and their history.
Thank you again for that very thoughtful question. Yes, Black Studies is under attack. The fact is I would encourage you as an incoming students to stand up and stand out. The momentum is going to be to get along, to simply make sure that you get to your next class, to turn inward and become an individual. But you came into the university as a Black person, and you need to remain a Black person and be a part of a vibrant Black community. So join other students, speak to the chair, speak to the dean. We need these classes. We did it in the 1960s, and now we're going to have to do it in the 2020s, but we have to do it again. The beauty of recording our history is so that we can inspire, equip, and empower another generation. And now we simply need to encourage that generation to join us in this epic struggle for freedom. So please.
I think, so at Texas Southern, and at Prairie View, when I was at Prairie View before, one of the things I always encouraged my students to do was to come and have a list of things. Have 3 things that you're gonna demand your faculty do, right? And one of them is have a reading list that looks like you, right? Like if you go to class, and I don't care what the class is, I taught rhetorical criticism, and it was called rhetorical criticism, but all the people you read were current active Black scholars doing rhetorical work, or scholars who have done that work, and they were all Black or brown, right? So that's one way that you can encourage, your classmates also to ask for things, right? Oftentimes, especially when it comes to programming, and I don't care where you go, I got my degrees at PWIs. I went to those PWIs and I said, you know, you brought in 15 speakers this year, and I didn't see ne'er a black person on that list. Ne'er a one. You mean to tell me ain't no black folks that could talk about biology? And I'm not a biology major, honey, so I don't actually care. But I asked for those things, my friends and I asked for those things because we wanted to see people that look like us. You can't tell us that we're gonna spend $20,000 to earn this degree and we don't see anybody that looks like us.
That's
right? So you can go in as a student and demand those things. If you see that they're not happening, if you see that there's an artist in residence and you look at the artist in residence list for the last 10 years and narrow black face, right? There are artists out here doing work. Make them bring in a sculptor to be the artist in residence that looks like you.
As the customer, you are the most powerful agent in the university.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I said earlier when we started, right, is that Black Studies was a student-led initiative. Students came together and said, we building this, we pay for this, we want an education that represents who we are as a people. And so I always try to encourage my students as well, like, my hands are tied because they cut my check. Okay? So y'all are cutting the check for them and then they cutting the check for me. So just owning your power as students and getting your little student organizations and y'all going around. Now I'm not gonna tell y'all what to do when I'm on campus, but I can tell you right now that you can find it. Okay, we have a question here in the back.
I'm a grandmother, and I find it interesting. My grandkids go to school. As you know, they've banned the books, the Black Author books, so that's quite challenging. I have teenagers again, and I find it challenging to talk to them about Black, being an African American. And it's almost as though they really don't, grandma, they don't even talk about that anymore.
Right.
So I'm trying to find ways to help my grandchildren accept their identity and be proud of who they are and dig deep into our culture. So there's some advice that we can share with me so we can share it with others. I think that is critical in this day and time. They do not have the resources. They go online, they see nothing.
Yeah. Man, that's a great question. You want to try it? No? Yeah, I'll take it. You want to try it? No?
Well, hold on. Can you say something?
Come on.
Go. Yeah.
First of all, let's take a moment to meditate. I'm joking.
Yeah.
Well, as you were speaking, I kept thinking about, so I have a teenager and a 10-year-old, and we have a lot of same issues at home. They have been, when I say immersed in blackness since they were little, they've been immersed in blackness since they were little. There's some people in this audience that can attest to that. But there's a thing with social media and technology that unearths and kind of undoes their ability to accept things as they are in society sometimes, even with their own culture and blackness. And one of the things that my wife and I have been very intentional in putting in their faces is, I think Dr. Harris was talking about bringing them to events where they see other people like themselves and they are immersed in it. So it's almost like, being dropped off into a foreign country. It may be foreign to them, it's really akin to who they are, and they have to realize, they just have to wake up to it. And as I was speaking about amnesia, that's part of the design of amnesia and culture. When you take out the access that someone has to culture, and again, I know I'm part of the art piece, but there's so many clues to our own ancestry that's tied to the art that's around us. But as Commissioner Ellis was talking about the artwork, I was amazed to see so much of it. I mean, there was a time when I was growing up in Houston where you wouldn't see a community center with any kind of intentionality with the art that was going on in the community. And so I think that if you look for opportunities for your grandchildren to be immersed in their own language, and when I mean language, I mean us, the language of us, I think that will start to dispel, it's not like a magic pill, but it starts to dispel some of the myth around the importance of their blackness. They need to basically be told and taught in a way that they can connect to, and that's, to me, it's just been taken straight to the water.
Right. I would simply say, so first of all, again, fantastic question. I would invite you to think about if blackness is a positive tool of empowerment, it's like someone asking you, would you like $100? And no matter how much money I got in my pocket, I can always use $100. Like, for real, I can always use some more money. But what that small illustration points out is that the way that blackness is construed inside of a white supremacist society, they are being encouraged, coerced to move away from their blackness. So what you're seeing is a survival technique, that this baggage, that this drama, that this history is deeply problematic and will not allow me access to the opportunities, the resources, and the power that I seek. And so it is not that I don't want to learn, it's just simply that it doesn't serve me like $100. The problem is, of course, is that they imagine that there is an escape, right? That somehow they're going to negotiate race or dance and bob and weave, and eventually they're going to end up in the safe space. Blackness is a strategic coalition of peoples who've chosen to wrap their destinies in one another's arms. And we have to embrace each other as a community. And so you offer them the art, the culture, the music. You encourage them to see themselves in literature and embrace their heritage and culture. And it's not going to be easy because they are literally being brainwashed. Each and every day they watch TV, flip through their phone, or engage in American society. The work that we do is liberatory. It is coercive. It is counterintuitive, but it is work that we must do. So I encourage you, my sister, continue to fight and bring them to our classes in these communities.
Nisha, do we have time for just one more question? One more, okay. I'm going to come to my loctician who laughed me down just so y'all know. Keep black hair alive.
Question. So I've been an educator in the public school setting for the last 7 years, and I teach ELA and social studies. And the last several years, they have decreased the amount of time that we have to teach it. They have taken away resources, so we have about 20 minutes, 15 of that is announcements. As a person who was homeschooled growing up, learning about my culture is very important in my household. And so sometimes I feel with the younger kids, I'm in 5th grade, it's very hard to not feel like your hands are tied because, especially politically speaking, there's so much going on. So it's almost like you have to walk on eggshells. Even some of the platforms we use to show documentaries are now banned. So I just wanted to know what advice or encouragement do you have for educators who it is important for us to truly teach our children and care about it when districts are taking out the things that we're able to do.
Good question.
2 minutes to address that.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking about this as you were talking. No, I'm not in secondary, but I was thinking, can you put things on the wall like the way that you decorate? And then that way that could maybe start discussions when there's not announcements. I also think about like, are there books that you can put that aren't banned but still by authors of color in the classroom so that then they can pick it up and it can be on their own accord? But that is a hard one because you're so limited. So, you know, the things that are okay, like can you post a quote by a Black activist, or, you know, can you put a painting by a Black artist in there and kind of stir that type of curiosity that maybe they'll take also outside of the classroom? But those are my initial thoughts.
No, I think this is a really important question and concern, and a lot of educators in the room are feeling pretty similar, stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I think just not folding before they make you, right? Just continuing the work as long as you can, and not complying ahead of time, right? And so I think just kind of keeping that spirit alive for yourself as well, connecting with people who are doing similar work, I think is one of the things that has been really helpful when we have an atmosphere of walking on eggshells. So,
I think I would simply say quickly, because I know Dr. Harris is staring at me right now. If we think about education as an apparatus and a structure, then we are asking ourselves, is the programming, is the technology creating an opportunity for us to get outside of it? It never will. The purpose is to keep you confined, to make you click OK at the end of the page, whether you agreed with what was said or not. And so we have to create new technologies, that this center is open to the public, and we can have freedom schools, right? That on our Saturdays, on other opportunities, we can come together once a month with other teachers and often provide the resources, opportunity, and power that the system is not ever going to give us, right? So think about alternative ways or different ways to manipulate the structure and the circumstances to create the space for you to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I was actually going to say exactly that. I went to school in California, and we did. What I learned about Black Studies. I learned at church.
Right.
Right. Now I know people don't do that no more. Find thine a church. Hallelujah. And do that there. Do that in other community center spaces where you can have those moments and learn. That's actually where I learned about African American fine artists, was at church, right? Because they had an art exhibit. So we can, for those of us who are going, let's do those kinds of things in our churches. Have those reading groups, have those art groups, have those field trips where you take kids to the museum on whatever the free night is, and y'all get in your little cars and drive, from the church parking lot to the museum and go see what's happening there. Right? Because we can do those things. Don't rely on what's happening in the schoolhouse, because it's not enough. It never has been. It was never supposed to be.
Amen.
Corrupting the time spent continuing here.
So really quickly, so I have actually taught in K-12. I spent the majority of my career, I've been teaching for 22 years, and I spent the majority of my time teaching in secondary. And I taught at PWI, and one of the things that I would do typically with my students, especially when I was teaching art history, was because I couldn't suggest certain things to them directly, I would always share with them what I was reading. I would share with them a playlist. In fact, they would always look forward to Mr. Suber's playlist. These are exhibits I'm looking at. These are books that I'm reading. I never, to me, it was my way of leading by example, showing them, okay, you can find culture, and don't go home telling your parents that this is on the list, because I ain't trying to get fired. However, this is what I'm doing. The nourishment that you're getting from me is coming from these books and these resources.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all so much. Now that we have kept the staff an extra 15 minutes. I'm type A, y'all get real anal about time. But I have so appreciated sharing time and space with all of you. I invite you to join the speakers out in the lobby as you make your way out and get those cookies. I want to say again, thank you to the Office of Commissioner Rodney Ellis, to all of our partners.